Hi, this is Chris from TWIOCH. I'm going to review YS VIII for the Switch today for you. For those of you who haven't played an YS game before, it's an action RPG series that's been around for a long time. I played YS I when I was a kid, if that tells you anything about the age of the series. The game itself, however, is a nice standalone entry to the series. You can jump right on in and not really feel like you've missed anything if you haven't played the previous ones. The gameplay is an action RPG, as I mentioned. For those of you who've played YS VII, it's a nice evolution of the YS VII combat system. You have 3 different characters in your party. You control one, the other 2 are AI controlled. You can switch on the fly though as you play. The great thing is when you switch, you don't end up switching to where the other one was at. They switch to where you're at. So if you're fighting an enemy and you find out that you're just not doing any good damage against them, you can switch to a different character on the fly and you'll still be standing in the same spot. I find that really handy. It's kind of a little different than how some of the other ones have done it. So you might have just realized, as I mentioned that you have to switch to deal damage in different ways. Each character has a different abilities and skills and are effective against different types of enemies. Essentially, you're breaking the defenses, if you will. The gameplay is fantastic. The core gameplay of the action and fighting is very smooth. I didn't really have any issues with frame rates or anything like that. It felt really good. Now, one thing they've done a little bit different in this one is they've layered in some additional gameplay options. These options make sense within the storyline. I don't want to give too much away with the story, so I'm going to give basically what you find out in the very beginning. So you are on a ship, you get shipwrecked, you kind of begin to develop a small village or community of the castaways. You go around and you find other castaways on the island and bring them back to the village with you. This solves 2 different functions, really. Since you're a castaway on an island, you can't buy new equipment. There's not a traveling merchant who just happens to be stranded on the island with you. Instead, you have to really find castaway members who can help with the upgrading of the equipment and stuff in a more natural way for the storyline. A good example is, in the very beginning, you can do some basic stuff to your weapons, but you really can't do anything sophisticated until you find a character who's a castaway who happens to know blacksmithing. So they can then upgrade your weapons even more. You can do some really basic potions initially because you're adventurer. You can do some basic potions, but nothing sophisticated. You find a doctor as a castaway who can then make you more sophisticated potions. I liked how they kind of brought that in, that you're on an island, then you're able to use a crafting system to essentially upgrade your weapons, but it wasn't presented in a way that you knew how to craft everything under the sun. You find different castaways who have different expertise who can craft them for you. As I mentioned, then that's one thing, is as you find the castaways, they then help with us crafting and upgrading new equipment. They also help with building out the facilities. They have side quests you can go on to provide better equipment for them to provide with you with better stuff. And also build one-on-one relationships and kind of unlock a little bit more about them. The Castaway Village also brings additional gameplay mechanics they haven't done before. For example, there's essentially I'd call it a tower defense gameplay section. You have to defend some points against waves of enemies. Now, the great thing about some of these additional gameplay mechanics is that they're not mandatory. They'll do a tutorial that's forced, and then most of them are optional after that. There's the tower defense one, there's a fishing mini game you can do, there's the building up of the village. Lots of this, as I mentioned, is mandatory, which is fantastic. Now, the story, I kind of give you the broad outline of it. I don't want to give into too much detail, as I mentioned. However, I will say it kind of begins a little bit slow. YS games are usually really well known for the stories. This one kind of is a slow build-up to it. The first quarter of the game is really about establishing your surroundings, and the main story really doesn't get kicked in until later on in the game. The game itself is really straightforward in terms of, in the beginning, you explore the island, you find the castaways. The more castaways you have, the more areas you can explore of the island. My only real big gripe is a map. And this is kind of big since one of your main points is to explore the island. The map was very frustrating, not intuitive. I found myself getting lost several times. I'd pull up the map and be like, okay, I know I need to get to point B over here. I'm in point A. I think I'm going the right direction. I'm following the indicators. And I all of a sudden walk into a dead end. That's been really only big gripe for the game. Overall, it was a fantastic game. I'd highly recommend it. If you enjoy action RPGs, such as the Mana series, Star Ocean, any of those, I'd highly suggest it. If you're more into traditional JRPGs, this may not be for you. Maybe watch the gameplay, maybe read a brief summary of the storyline and see if that would intrigue you. It's got a great story, as I mentioned. Not quite as in-depth as the traditional JRPG, but it's quite a bit. The action's great. The soundtrack is fantastic. The game would take probably 3 dozen hours to beat, roughly, if you play on normal mode. Now, there are all additional difficulty modes. I did not try them myself. I just played on normal. But they do have, I believe it was 2 additional difficulty modes if you really want to give yourself an additional challenge. They also have easier modes too if you just want to play it mostly for the story and the quick gameplay. Overall, highly suggest this game. I played it on the Switch. I thought it was great on the Switch for the portability, or you can play it at home. Both work fantastic. No frame rate issues on either one. If you don't have a Switch, it is available on the PS4 as well. And if you live in Japan and watching this for some reason, you could play it on the Vita. Thanks for tuning in. This is Chris again from TWIOCH. Have a great day.